Hello and welcome to Lord of the Rings, the living card game. I'm the White Tower Watchman. This video is going to be sort of a rules primer and a preamble to my Shadow and Flame playthrough, just to make a note here. Now, there's a finicky rules thing that's different in this one that I just want to address beforehand before you watch my Shadow and Flame video. Um, this was just like a little rule that I kind of slipped up on when I was playing. It doesn't really affect anything other than the order you deal shadow cards. So I was reading over I got confused when I did my playthrough, and I decided to do this preamble to it because I realized there's when Durin's Bane's engaged with both players, basically he's considered to be engaged with both players when their threat are 1 or greater, okay? And then you deal shadow cards in engagement cost order. Now, if you watch that playthrough, what I was doing was I was dealing, like, let's say you have 2 enemies engaged with 2 players and you have Durin's Bane. What I was doing that playthrough is I was dealing shadow cards here, and then I was dealing, then, we do attacks in whichever order you choose. So like he would, defend this guy's attack and so on and so forth. And then so this would be the first player, and then the next attack would be Durin's Bane, because if his threat's 1, he's engaged with this player here. And then what I was doing was I was dealing the enemy shadow cards, and then I was going ahead and I was dealing Durin's Bane shadow cards after. So like then I'd defend with this guy, and then I would immediately discard the shadow card. Now I was half right. So in the rules reference, it does say Durin's Bane stays in the staging area, is considered to be engaged with all players whose threat is 1 or greater, allowing it to both add its threat to the staging area and attack. Durin's Bane attacks each player it is engaged with once during that player's normal enemy attack resolution step. 1 shadow card per engaged player should be dealt at the beginning of combat, just as you normally deal shadow cards. Now that's the part I was messing up on. Nothing really changed in the playthrough because it just so happened that all of my shadow cards were either in the playthrough, all of my shadow cards were either goblin swordsmen that would be added to the staging area according to its shadow effect, or they were just bonus attacks, like for instance this card, +1 attack. There were no like game-changing shadow effects, so they would have just happened in different order. And for the most part, I chump blocked for the entire scenario, and I don't think, spoiler alert, I don't think I ever blocked even one time with a hero in the scenario. So nothing would have changed, and I mean I'm still getting the same chance off the top of the encounter deck for each card, so like nothing would have changed really drastically. I just didn't technically do everything in the exact order. Okay, instead of dealing like shadow card, shadow card, shadow card, shadow card, I would deal shadow card, shadow card, shadow card, shadow card, because I remembered this rule wrong. It does say here, each shadow card is only used once and is immediately discarded after the attack is completed. That way Durin's Bane doesn't receive benefits for more than 1 shadow card at a time. Now, that part I did correctly because I remembered that from the rules insert. You, instead of discarding all the shadow cards at the end of combat or whenever that enemy gets destroyed, as you normally would, you discard the shadow card from Durin's Bane immediately after it attacks. That's just a special rule for him. And then, now one little last thing here. It says, if a player whose threat is not 1 or greater has his threat raised during combat, then Durin's Bane attacks him if he has not completed the attack resolution step, as he normally would. So let's say that, what that means is, let's say for instance, I've got shadow card dealt here, I got a shadow card dealt here. Let's say this player's threat's, 1, and this player's threat 0. Okay, the way it would work is you would, if this is how this combat round starts, the combat phase, you would deal a shadow card here to the highest engagement cost enemy with the first player. You would deal a shadow card to Durin's Bane because his engagement cost 1. Then you deal a shadow card here, and as of right now, at the moment shadow cards are dealt, Durin's Bane's not dealt a shadow card for this player because he's not going to attack this player. He's not engaged with that player. Okay, now let's say I did Wandering 2 here, and I reduced my threat by 3 to give him to another player and raised his threat by 3. Okay? In that case, Now what would happen is this guy would attack me, okay? Then Durin's Bane would not attack me because my threat's 0. Then Durin's Bane would attack these, this enemy would attack, this guy or whoever I defend with. And then Durin's Bane would attack this player. Now he would use the shadow card that was dealt from the other player there, but he would not be dealt another shadow card, okay? Because we're already past the deal shadow card step. Now that's a little bit different than there is a rule in the rules reference that, like, when an enemy, anytime it gets an extra attack in or outside the combat phase, you always deal a shadow card to it. So let's say, for instance, we're outside of the combat phase. Pretend these guys aren't here. We're outside of the combat phase. Durin's Bane, let's say in the quest phase we get this. Durin's Bane makes an immediate attack against the first player, or say we flip this. Durin's Bane makes an immediate attack against the first player. Okay. He would get the shadow card because he's starting a whole nother attack. So he gets a shadow card. Okay? And then he makes an attack against the first player with that treachery. However, if we're in the combat phase and one of these players, like let's say his threat's 3, his threat's 0 or whatever. Or let's say both their threats are 0. Now what would happen is he would get a shadow card. He would get a shadow card because they're engaged. He would not get any shadow cards because we're already past that step. And then let's say somebody plays a doomed card, like let's say they play a doomed 2 event over here, and then both players raise their threat by 2 in the combat action window. Then he would attack the first player. He would attack the first player without a shadow card. He would attack the second player, and then he would attack the second player without a shadow card because we're already past the step. If it's the normal attack that he does during the combat phase and your threat's raised somewhere in between attacks, you would not deal shadow cards. If it was an extra attack from a treachery, you deal a shadow card no matter where it is. And I just wanted to make that clear because it's a finicky rule. If you want to play an absolute perfect game, that's how you would do it. The way I did in my playthrough was I would deal a shadow card to the first player's highest engagement cost and the second player's regular engaged enemies, and then I would deal these shadow cards as I went. Now I rewatched the playthrough, and as far as I can tell, nothing really drastically changed. Like I said, all my shadow cards were either blank, they were Goblin Swordsmans, which were just added to the staging area, or they were bonus to attacks, like this card right here. So nothing really changed. I chump blocked like 99% of the game. I think only at the very end Hama defended a goblin, and Aragorn defended a goblin once. So it doesn't really affect anything since the whole game was chump blocked. But I just wanted to make that clear for people watching my playthrough. I want this to be an absolutely comprehensive study of the game when it's a serious progression play video. If I'm just playing a fun random game, I wouldn't even mention this, but I want to make my progression series playthroughs as close to perfect as possible. So if you're a new player and you're trying to understand certain difficult rules, that's basically how it goes. You deal all your shadow cards in engagement cost order. If no one's threat is above 0, he's not considered to be engaged. So you wouldn't deal him shadow cards. But then if their threat were raised, now it would have to be by likely a player card effect, like a doomed keyword or something, because I don't think there's any shadow effects in here that raise your threat. So like if these guys, there's really no shadow effects in here that raise your threat. So it would have to be from like a doomed keyword or wandering toque or something. And then if they like say his threat and his threat become 2 before the attack step, but after the shadow card step, then he would attack without a shadow card, he would attack without a shadow card. Okay? And then if it's a special treachery card, he gets dealt a shadow card, it starts a whole new attack step. Okay? And then What I was doing in the game was I was dealing and discarding the shadow cards as he was attacking. You deal them at still the same time you deal everybody else. It's just you discard them immediately. Whereas every other enemy, you only discard them when this enemy's destroyed, or if no enemies are destroyed and there's still shadow cards left, you discard all the shadow cards at the end of the combat phase in any order you choose. Okay, but this guy's shadow cards are discarded immediately because the rules insert tells you to. Okay, that's it. That's my little rules lesson for Shadow and Flame, and I hope you enjoyed the playthrough.